Okay, welcome again to our 14th Biennale of European Mountain Planet. Now we have the second day with our keynote speaker, that I thanks a lot for coming here. The first keynote is Gerhard Vittinghoff with the social housing and benefits in Austria, an approach in creating inclusive and just settlements. Just a few words to present Gerhard. Spatial planner, Austria, President INU 2022-2025, delegated to the Austrian Federal Chamber of Engineers section, Spatial Planning, Senior Chamber of Engineers section, Spatial Planning, Vice President 2012-2022, member of the German AERL Advisory Group. Special interest award are land use, strategic and structural planning, public participation, social housing, environmental planning, and town planning law. Thank you again, and please.
Okay, thanks a lot for the invitation. Can everybody hear me at the back? It seems.
Okay, we have just problem, but he will speak aloud. So please silence.
Okay.
Alessia.
Okay. Social housing is really a key factor for a just city. And, you know, as spatial planners, we really need to place specific emphasis on this part. And I want to really focus my attention on Vienna. The first social housing program commenced in 1923. Then after the Second World War, a reconstruction program was undertaken. And then around 2001, attempt was made to refurbish the thermal, thermal refurbishment of the stock was undertaken. To your left side, there's an example of one of those social housing projects that were implemented in around 1920s. It's actually a prime example of really successful social housing in Vienna, and it actually still is working, and it's actually very well integrated in the urban fabric. I think that's really crucial in social housing, that these estates are well integrated into the urban fabric. The ownership in social housing in Vienna is quite clearly directed to the rental homes. And what's as well particular to Vienna, the freestanding home is really, the housing stock is actually standing housing, because that's always a very squanderous way of using resources in urban development. On the institutional framework, and I think that is crucial in social housing, that actually the state is actually taking up a major portion in organizing that. Austria, we've got a federal state, and on this federal state level, there are really major acts in place to arrange social housing. And then on the provincial level, steps or laws are in act to actually implement the federal procedures. And on the provincial level, the town planning schemes, the building schemes, the quality standards are regulated, and then the financial conditions, because we've got differences in various municipalities. A cornerstone in the Austrian housing system are the limited profit housing associations. We've got about, in Austria, the complete Austria, in all 9 provinces, about 200 housing partnerships or firms, and they actually cover for particular income groups and housing solutions. about half of the units are reserved for the socially. I think what actually makes these limited housing associations so successful is that they do have tax, for example, they do have tax reliefs, but they need to meet certain provisions. For example, their profits are limited, then they do have to reinvest their profits, and the cost limited rents are being used for refinancing to actually upkeep the building stock. Now, what's very important, and that's the way Vienna is going. Firstly, identifying well accessible states or land for these developments. And there's a public fund, a so-called land bank, that actually organizes these sites for development. They are very well integrated into the urban fabric, especially the transport nodes are quite close. And there's a very close cooperation with the planning departments, so that is streamlined and there aren't any hiccups in the development schemes then further. And these funds play a major role in allocating subsidies for new constructions. Then the second part, and I think that's a very interesting part of the Viennese or the Austrian system, is that we have specific zoning categories to actually accommodate social housing. They are regulated by the Viennese Building Code and as well the town planning law. These sites or these zones do have a price limit by law. Then the rent limit, the net rent is limited for this specific zone, and then 2/3 of the residential floor space needs to be allocated for social housing. So from the start, on the zoning level, it's already indicated that 2/3 of the residential floor space needs to be used for social housing projects. And that actually makes it so interesting to work with. So the next thing that I want to go through with you is the Viennese model, the key principles. And what I want to point out this is now just a picture of a development that took place quite in the center of Vienna. Within this compound or this development, you've got the whole range of housing, starting from the social housing to actually properties being owned by a person. And that's actually the start of the social mix, because what we really try to avoid in Austria is the ghettoization of social housing, because I think that's the worst thing that one could actually do, to actually separate these various needs. And what's important as well is that these on these limited profit housing companies, they need to actually arrange these provisions for a wide range, wide brand of housing that is offered. And as well, the other part is as well the green space. That's a center part of the social housing. So the first part is the innovation and quality, major emphasis on that, public participation, inclusion and social mix, diversity and integration, and then open space. Those are the key aspects of the social housing. The first thing, and that we are actually required by law to integrate public participation in this whole process. And we do need to as well prove that these results of the public participation is actually integrated in our. And what is very interesting to migrants to actually filter out their needs, what are actually the ideas that they have got. Interesting, because I've been involved in such a project in now coming back to that later, a site And, you know, it was so interesting to engage with these people for which you actually plan. And I think that's as well a crucial part to make it possible that it's crucial. These results really need to be integrated in your plan making. It mustn't just be an alibi action, because, you know, that's unfortunate for our time. Now, when the site has been allocated, the city of Vienna would actually then arrange a planning competition. And depending on the site and the amount of units that are planned for, this panel is arranged and set into place. And then depending, as I said, you know, 3 to 10 developers with their planners are engaged, and the projects are then evaluated against 3 core criteria. And starting from the social sustainability, efficient planning, then on the architecture part, the innovative design, then the next criteria is that these flats or these units are affordable, because, you know, if we are planning and, you know, the units aren't affordable, we are actually losing our track. And then the ecological criteria. And, you know, using these criteria, then, you know, it's quite clear to actually then decide which project actually addresses the needs coming from the public participation. Then this is a project that I was involved. You know, it was quite close to the Viennese central station. It was a derelict land that was redeveloped. And within these pockets, you know, this development took place. And within these pockets, you had a whole range of housing possibilities, starting from the social needy to the more wealthy population. And I think what's important is that your project needs to have varying floor spaces, you know, starting from 50 square meters to larger units, because with that, it's possible to integrate social mix in this project, and as well inclusion. Then central in this idea was the public space, because, you know, public space is a meeting place where people can engage. And then, and I think, and I already said it before, a well-integrated, this site needs to be well integrated into the urban space. And that what makes this project so special is that it's close to a major node, a traffic node in Vienna. And that in that way, you can actually support the needy in this situation. Now, this is a very interesting project. I wasn't involved in that, but, you know, this is actually something, if you are interested in Vienna, you definitely need to see this project. It's about 140 units with, you know, starting from 40 square meters to up to about 100 square meters. Around 300 inhabitants are living here, and, you know, the whole range of migrants in Austria are represented in this tiny spot. And the one thing is, you know, the elderly people are looking after children of the mothers or the families that are working. So that's one part where you are trying to get social mix, integration, and then other places here in this lot, there was a communal kitchen planned, and that was a second aspect where integration and diversity is taking place. And that's as well on a Saturday or Friday evening. That's actually a very interesting place, because this actually involved into a restaurant where these various population groups are actually offering their specific cuisine. This is really a nice place to go on a Friday. I don't want to make now any being a tourist guide. Then another thing that's interesting is the public open spaces, because that's the place where the children are, you know, talking to each other. You know, they learn German. It's a very important thing for people to engage. Okay, now I'm coming to the strategic development plan, because within the strategic development plan, that's a keystone of this plan that is revised every 10 years. Social housing is integrated. The first tenet of this development plan is existing housing stock, to upgrade and uplift the existing housing stock. And this is the area where the formal refurbishment is taking place, and as well to actually make these units more attractive. Then there are these pockets within the urban framework, and that was the example that I presented to you, the Viennese central station. And then because Vienna is growing rapidly, we need to develop on the outskirts, because otherwise it would be impossible to actually tackle the demand for housing. And this is a very interesting project. It is the Seestadt Vienna. It was a old airport, and here are the key facts, short facts. About 240 hectares. It is planned for 30, about 20,000 residents. And what's here very important, it is a mixed use from the start. This facilitates that. And you are in the center of Vienna. With suggest that if you are Vienna, go to this development site, because it's a very interesting project. And the target for the modal split, because I think that's as well a way to facilitate the urban poor, is 30% on cycling and walking, 20% access. And there's a radical shift to facilitate this. Now, just quickly, the zoning on this, this site, quite clearly a mixed use on the outskirts, the more intensive development, and it is as well in the middle, there's a water feature. Then the next aspect, this is actually on the densities, being the core, really the most dense development, and then on the outskirts. And then finally, because that was as well a part of or a crucial part of this development, because, if you structure, it's vital to as well provide green space. And about 40% is allocated of the total space to green space, and it is really integrated into the housing estate, as seen in the photo to your right-hand side, that it mingles with the built structure and the green structure. And there we are getting into the whole idea, the notion of green and blue infrastructure, because that's as well an aspect or element that makes the. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Gerhard. At the end of the three keynotes, we will open a discussion. So I will ask to João Teixeira to come here. He's a special planner and a civil engineer, Portugal, past president of the CEU, member d'honneur Société Française des Urbanistes, past president in Lisbon and Tagus Valley Regional Development Commission, past president in Lisbon Social Housing Company, past president Travolizzo, Municipal Waste Treatment Company, Lisbon Lisbon University, consultant GT Associados, Planning and Engineering.
Here. Okay, that's right.
Thank you so much. Okay. So thank you, João. And the title of this presentation is Housing Crisis, Legal Settlement 1980 and the Simplification 2024. Please.
Okay, good morning. Everybody's listening? Yeah, on the back side also?
More or less.
I'll try to do my best. First, I want to thank this invitation to be here speaking with you. And I'll speak about two periods of housing crisis in Portugal that suggest solutions for the future, tackling immediate needs for affordable housing in Portugal and also in other countries, as you can see. The first one is the Valmilhaços housing development, the illegal settlement constructed in the 1960s and 70s, and their reconversion in the 1980s based on Valmilhaços neighborhood reconversion. And in second part, the 2020 housing crisis, the socialist government solution adopted in the beginning of 2024, simplification of processes along with social housing construction. Now the first part.
It's working.
Oh, it's
Try.
working.
Maybe,
Thank you.
Maybe.
Oh, it's working? Yeah? Okay. We'll try the mix, maybe. Valmilhaços is located, thank you. Valmilhaços is located 22 kilometers south Lisbon, as you can see here in the map. And in the 1960s, several bigger enterprises were inaugurated in South Lisbon, such as National Steel Industry and Margueira shipyards, and they were creating thousands of new jobs. Also, the bridge connecting Lisbon to South Bank was built in 1966. So the accessibility was really in it. And the demand for houses and land for construction settlements also, because government could not control the situation. Valmilhaços was an illegal allotment with plots around 300 square meters to 2,000 square meters along informal streets without infrastructures and without equipment. And so you can see a photo, how is it today? The reconversion of Valmilhaços illegal settlement and constructions was based in the following principles. The general plan developed involving new landowners in public meetings, later approved by the municipality. A local technical team was created, paid by the municipality to implement the plan, to help house owners to adapt existing houses according to legislation, and to inform the local population about the plan and to control construction. The larger plots were destined to public equipments. The owners of small plots have to give up 10% of land area when possible for social equipments and infrastructures. The cost of infrastructures like street paving, water, sewage, electricity, and telephone infrastructures were paid by the new owners of plots and houses with installments during 5 years, because lots of them were poor families. And infrastructures projects were coordinated by the technical team. And the illegal promoter of the land had to pay a fine and to give the land that he had. And currently, the accessibility has been increased with bus network and new railway. The nearest station is located 700 meters from Valdemilhaços, and so there is a good accessibility. Reconversion and rehabilitation was a very successful operation. It is a 128 hectares neighborhood with 5,000 homes, taking advantage of urban infrastructures, domestic waste collection service, public transport, and social facilities, a kindergarten to public schools, a private school, a sports center, an eco-museum, green areas, urban park, as well as stores for everyday supplies. And today, a house located in Valdemilhaços can worth between 300,000 euros and 700,000 euros. The vision, the reconversion plan, the coordination of the teamworks were carried out by Professor Costa Lobo. Maybe some of you knew him. He was one of the founders of ECTP-CEU when in 1985. He was my professor also, and I'm very proud I worked with him during 15 years. On the right side of the map, you have the area of public spaces that were obtained with the plan and with this operation. And you see, you can see that it's a good area of public space for Valdemilhaços. And now some photos. What is it now? First photo is this one with this green area. Another photo with also with a school. Another photo with and I speak now about the problem of 2020 housing problem in Portugal. The living conditions and income survey carried out by the National Statistics Institute, published in 2023, presents some conclusions of which I highlight. 12.9% of the population lives in overcrowded housing, of which 21% are young people and 14% adults. And the overcrowded rate was 9.1% in 2022, and the overcrowding rate for foreigner workers is 22.6%. And also, the risk of living in a situation of housing insufficiency is more significant for the population at risk of poverty, which was 27.7% in 2023. To summarize, you can say that it is the biggest housing crisis in the last 20 years in Portugal, and it can be summarized as little construction, high prices, and empty houses. This is not consistent with all these three components. Why is it not? Because in 2022, there was construction, there were built 23,500 new homes were built, but in 22, 124,000 were built. So there is a big difference between the two. Why is it? Because many construction companies closed during the financial crisis from 2008 to 2013. And also because prices are high because demand is much higher than supply. And there is many empty houses. We calculate about 723,000 houses are empty because they are located in the populated regions, and also because courts are very slow in resolving conflicts. And to solve the housing crisis, it's necessary to build about 70,000 homes per year. And according with Berkshire Hathaway Home Service Real Estate Report 2024, there is a shortage of 300,000 homes, and prices increased 10% between in 2023 compared with 2022, and sales in 2023 decreased 25%, and also, that is a big component, also that last one, there are more than 700,000 foreigners living in Portugal, and the demand continues to increase because of good temperature, good weather, good food, and special conditions for foreigner people taxes. Thank you. And so I'll pass this one to accomplish the time. To solve the 2020 housing crisis, the Portuguese government took several decisions in 2023 and 2024, namely a new generation of housing policies with the following objective: to respond to families living in severe housing shortage, to guarantee access to housing for all those who have no access to the market, to create the conditions to rehabilitation to be the main form of intervention in building and urban development, and to promote social and territorial inclusion along with housing choice opportunities. The main measures to achieve such objectives are to supply the approval process for construction projects, to invest 3,000 million euros to rehabilitate and build new homes at affordable costs, financed by the Recovery and Resilience Facility corresponding to 26,000 homes. To exempt from housing taxes until 2029 the owners who give up tourist accommodation in favor of urban rental, to reduce housing rental taxes at affordable costs, and to reduce or release real estate capital gains on the sale of second homes or land to repay a loan for home and permanent housing. And so, what are my final considerations? Recent policy became very expensive and takes time to implement. It doesn't ensure population involvement besides minimum public participation, that one that is obliged by the law. Complementary between housing policy and new urbanization plans can be a strong solution adequate to present needs, I dare say locally. Several new municipal or part municipal developments could ensure large and diversified offer of affordable houses, claiming often by general population. New urbanization plans of municipal initiative, producing plots at affordable price, give the possibility to families invest in their own home over several years, mobilizing savings and reducing the state expense on housing development. It also allows tailor-made projects able to evolve through time, adequate to need families. You know, the family initially is expanding after is reducing the number of its components. And so the house can do the same when they are private houses and lonely houses, isolated houses, and adopting different sustainable solutions, as example, like steel framing or like wooden frame. And to conclude, new urbanization plans and municipal initiative benefiting from lessons learned appeared as a solution to be large, explored in Portugal reality, and also in several other countries in Europe. The intervention of specialized teams could empower and guide citizens to embrace the form of self-construction, to accelerate urban planning, infrastructures, and construction. But also, they can easily ensure urban diversity, meaning mixed use, mixed social classes, mixed local activities, traditional along with high-tech, and mixed daily routines leading to vivid city fabric. And also they can easily explore new ways of universal public space, more flexible, more connected, inspiring pedestrians and cycling mobility with opportunity to perform body exercise toward, for example, activity aging. And can easily explore new islands of climate shelter like tree concentration, shadow shelters, and so on. And because it's municipal initiative, it empowers the municipal participation and people engagement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, João, very interesting, and also the topic of housing is a very central inclusion. We will continue the discussion later. So now I will ask you to Tomasz Majda to conclude this keynote speech session. The title of his presentation is a systematic approach to inclusivity in times of climate change. Tomasz Majda is a special planner from Poland. He is a president of the Society of Polish Town Planners. Faculty of Architecture is a Warsaw University of Technology, and he is the owner of SPAT, which means Urban Design and Planning Office. So, thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
I think where you're going to go. So, yeah. And look here on that. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I will try to keep this microphone close to my mouth to be heard. This presentation is more about a systematic approach, so it will contain less numbers than the previous ones. I will start with some. I don't know how to.
Yes, okay.
No.
And this is
if it's just
to come back. No, the problem is that there is this one. He doesn't.
Okay, we'll let it be.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So. Okay.
So the impact of the climate change will disproportionately affect the weakest, therefore the most vulnerable. And according to John Rawls' social justice concept, what we can do is help them equalize their life chances. Because from a sustainable perspective, same development perspective, it's important to build the capacity to adapt to climate change without increasing the risk for them. I will focus on inclusiveness of disabled people, and I will close this presentation in Poland. So I don't know how to make it everything visible, but anyway, the Ministry of Development assessed that 30% of our society is disabled, disabled permanently or on the top. Yeah.
It's the top of the application.
Yeah. Okay. Or maybe. Okay. So anyway, I was preparing this presentation looking for yesterday's speeches, so I put sometimes more text because the screen was very big yesterday. So anyway, these disabled people, this 1/3 of the society, is not a formal disabled people, and they don't have this disability status. So okay, yeah. So aside the people with formal status, which is quite obvious, cerebral palsy, arthroporosis, short stature, amputations, and so on. We have people with hearing impairments, cognitive difficulties. We may also treat in that way movement, or people traveling with heavy luggage or trolleys. People age 65 or more, and in 2 years or 3 years ago, it was 1/4 or 22% of the Polish population, and in 2050 it will be 1/3 of the population. So this is the problem affecting more than half of the population. The problem of or the issue of disabled people problems started rather long ago. The pioneer in this field was Professor Halina Skibniewska. She started in the 1950s, and until the end of the century, she was fighting with this issue in architecture. But in fact, the beginning of the debate were in a very local scale. It was very local activities. Then NGOs started to talk about it on the national level, and the first initiative that you cannot see is in Poland Without Barriers. It was initiative of Integration Association. And then there was our society idea for the competition for the best public space in Poland, in which one of the criteria was accessibility of the public space. And then it appeared that it's also not enough because it was lost among other criteria. So together with the we created another competition devoted strictly to accessibility. It's accessibility leader, and then it started to be more interesting for others. And the city of Warsaw started in 2016 architectural award for the mayor of Warsaw, and a few years later we also started a special award for accessibility. And then national level started with accessibility partnership under the Prime Minister, and then the Accessibility Council, which is kind of work team, is working also on national level. So between this UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, there was a continuous debate how to address the problem. And finally, in 2019, we have adopted an act on ensuring accessibility for persons with special needs. I think the font also has changed. Sorry for this. So, in my opinion, it was a wrong decision, because as you can see on the diagram, we have a lot of acts going into force. In 2022, it was almost 3,000 acts, and it means that our law has been changed every 32 minutes. So it's almost an, if we compare it to the computers, it looks like a hacker's attack to this to overload the system. So I was rather fighting for implementing these issues to the fields of activity existing in our arts, and I thought it would be more effective. So we have these competitions that I was talking about before, so we can check what is the effect of this. I'll start with the competition of our Society of Polish Town Planners for the best public space in Poland. And the first fact we can see is, well, the public space is the realm of the public authority. So this diagram shows that the local authorities invest in rising of existing land. So we the investment in greenfields are rather seldom. It's quite opposite to the private investors. But then, when we come to the character investment, we can see that almost half and half of the investment is in urbanized areas, and the other half is in green areas. So it's a more equal attitude. But when we look at the time scale, we may find that in the beginning, we invested more in urban structures, and the breaking point was the pandemic, when the investment in green open spaces was much more popular, and were well, collect much more money than the urban investment. So it doesn't say much about the, as I told you, the accessibility of this public space in this competition was just one of the criteria. And when that's the entries, we can say that in the beginning of this competition, accessibility was closed in one sentence. And at the end, it big to be filled. But of course, it's better to show it on the another example of the competition. This accessibility leader, President of the Republic of Poland, is devoted especially to the accessibility. And we awarded in several categories: the public space, small public facility, and big public facility, office or retail facility, residential or hotel facility, historic buildings, network of services outlets, and local authority, and architects and urban planner. And because it's a very important competition, the president himself awards the winners and so on. It shows really growing importance in our society. The realization, the implementation of any design awarded or honored in one competition was a standard for the next time. So it was really rapid improvement in the quality. And right now, all the universities has its own centers for universal design, and all designers are probably trained in this field. The last World Urban Forum in Katowice was said to be the most successful. It's a history of success. And it was totally bottom up. We forced first the local authorities, then, and they felt our pressure. And yeah, and now I could say this is a story of success. Now I will show just one example of a park. It's a storm action park in Warsaw. It was finished just recently. It's on General Assembly on Sunday we were talking about circularity. This hill is made of rubble after the Second World War, after the Warsaw Uprising, and this was also circular attempt because we used everything that was usable to rebuild Warsaw, and only rubble like this was dumped on the hill in some part. Now it's surrounded by housing estates, rubber dams. This design, this project was third or fourth nature, and all tools for environment. Okay, so I have to speed up. And of course, it was also addressed to disabled people. But finally, and for example, this trench is cut in the hill just to let the disabled people come easy. And of course, this lots of environmental issues also involved in here. For example, this layers of concrete were spread with moss meal. It was a mixture of yogurt and moss to enhance the moss growing. But finally, when you are going on the top, in terms of design, this contrast is understandable, but the top of the hill is inaccessible. It's too steepy. It's open. So it's also the escape routes are not very convenient. So on the top, you cannot see is written that mitigation wins with accessibility, which is strange because this is the city investment. And we used to say that adaptation is the case of most, or usually of local authorities, and mitigation is on the state level. In Poland, it looks like we locally fight for mitigation more than for adaptation, at least in terms of accessibility. And why should we talk about this problem? Hurricane Katrina, during extremes, which are most often in climate change period, they are with lots of deaths. Sorry, I have to. No, I mean that all this on the picture is a flood, but we have different extremes, and most of them are together with some penalty, with some deaths. And in Katrina, 50% of death people was over 75, which were just 6% of the population. So it shows that they are disproportionately affected by the risk, and it's because they cannot hear. They have to follow the official signals, but they are in visual or just voice or understandable and so on. So these signals are often understandable by disabled people. And then, sorry, it's a mess with the font. I don't know why it has changed in the presentation. Probably better if it's better. On Macintosh, yeah. Okay, I was. And why do we talk about it in spatial planning? My diploma student did a research on one of the most rapidly converted area from business center to housing estate. And she adaptation map for the climate change. Different was checking the conversion of the space. And she found out that none of existing models implemented in the space is optimal for disabled people change. So we need an intervention, and intervention is possible using to deal with this problem. So how does our planning system look like? We had a quite sustainable, I would say, system, because we had this economic, social, and environmental issues, and they were optimized in spatial planning documents as a platform for optimization. And the integration process was on procedures. It was not very effective. We get also some money out of the next generation European Union, 60 billion euro. And the planning and development reform was one of the elements. And the milestone was entering into force a new Spatial Planning and Development Act. But in the same time, we negotiated that we will create also an act on sustainable urban development. So how it looked like in our system. This integration of spatial and or social economy was changed to not implementation. That's well, let's say spatial planning documents just disappeared from the system. They were integrated into, not with, economic documents. So now we have economic strategies based on another act, and we implement just policies using the former documents. So there is no connection between environmental documents. We have lots of implementation documents on the local level, but still this general document that is between economic strategies and the implementation document, sorry, if you don't, once again, this document doesn't help to use also these models built, even if there will be any spatial models in strategy, and to go through to the implementation plans. So we have, as you can see, accessibility standards, and they cannot be compared with environmental issues. Right now, it was just tiered up. Yeah, it's probably the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I have also the other two keynote speakers? Please come here. Just to open a legal discussion. So Gerhard, Thomas, and João, please. The other is Peter. João? So, very, very interesting case studies. 3 different cities, all three, I think, a case of success. Please. So I can observe three important keywords: participation, public space, and accessibility. But also, the kind of cross keywords is risk, because in all three presentation risk, so something that you don't expect happening. Flood or environmental crisis, also pandemics, any different kind of crisis, also economic. So, if inclusion means do not leave no one behind, in your different cases, fragile people were really considered, and have you measured that they really have the same quality of places, housing of everyone? So, I would like to have an answer about it.
Yes, I certainly think so that, you know, through the models and especially, you know, those various types of housing, it is on, and it was actually effective to actually integrate various population groups. And I think what's so interesting is as well is that because, you know, the people of, you know, various income are concentrated in one space that is very accessible, you know, that actually makes it possible that everybody can partake in the economic and social process. But one thing that I really want to stress is access. And, you know, if your site for social housing needs to be well integrated into the urban fabric, it needs to have access to all the wide range of services that the area offers. And one thing as well that we actually saw in actually all the major cities in Austria is you need to, you know, it's very important that you avoid ghettoization, because, you know, those are actually the hotspots for urban problems and social decay.
Okay, from my point of view, I think that there is several objectives that we must consider. The first objective is the mixed use. The second objective is the social integration. And the third objective is the accessibility. The accessibility in the two different parts, we have to have accessibility inside and to have accessibility to workplaces, to schools, and so on, the other parts of the city. And to make happen all these objectives is really different sometimes. First, in the center of the cities is difficult because the price of the land is so high and the price of the apartments is so high that governments are not in position to buy and to renovate. And so generally the renovation is made by private investments, and the private investment is paid and rental, and so the price is going up and up and up. And so it's necessary to have some good strategy, even in these big developments in the center of the city, so that people will be maintained, so that people that cannot afford to go to buy houses in the market can be also maintained in the center of the cities. Is really difficult, but it depends on the big dialogue between the municipalities, the planners, and the investors. And that can be achieved sometimes, not always. And so what happens in lots of cities all over Europe is that poor people is abandoning the center of the cities and is beginning living all around places that are 20, 25, 30, 44. It depends on the locations from the center of the city, and they are out of their social friends, their social families, let's say like that. And that is really bad. So it's important to have from the plenaries, it's important to have big, long, and structured dialogues so that these objectives can be maintained.
I think all our countries has different perspective, different experiences. In case of Poland, this competition leader, accessibility leader, shows, for example, that the entries to the competition are the most problematic or the poorest one in housing category. So the category of housing estates are at the lowest accessibility level in terms of architecture. I'm not talking about the economic accessibility because in Poland it's still lacking about 3 million flats. So the problem is rather serious, and we need to implement other tools in other countries. So, answering to your question, we don't treat yet the people in equal way. And it's I think the implementation of this idea would be different in cases.
Thanks a lot. Someone else want to add something? Yes.
My name is Gerhard. I have two questions of our Austrian colleague. In your presentation, you have mentioned there is some special zoning category for the public housing. If you could explain how they get related to the other zoning categories, whether this is actually part of the national law, or this is just public specific Vienna, and how does that actually relate to the taking out the kind of mixed type of structures and mixing different social groups? And the second question to Tomasz, you have mentioned this special competition regarding the public spaces, which decided to Polish company. I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the question of climate change and adaptability and climate change responses in general, like the solutions regarding the climate change response, which are built in these public spaces, and whether actually are also promoting this kind of solutions along to understand this.
Thank you for the question, because this is really a key aspect of our zoning schemes. And, you know, it differs from Vienna to the other zoning schemes in Austria. But the idea is, and it's partly an economic issue, this zone. You know, the zone is a mixed use. It allows mixed uses, because, you know, only through a mixed use you can actually have a viable urban area in a city like Vienna. Then the second part is as well, the density is an issue here, because, you know, only through the densities you can have these thresholds for, you know, for public transport and services. And then thirdly is, well, but that's then actually on the structure planning level, is then it is decided how much of the open space, how much of the total area is used for open space. And, you know, the Seestadt example that I showed you, there was quite clearly, you know, in the guidelines for that area, it was stipulated that 40% is used for green space, and that needs to be integrated into the urban fabric, because only through this integration into the urban fabric, it is maintained well, it is actually used by people. It's just not a lot that somewhere nobody actually uses. And that's the interesting part of this zone, like in the Vienna model. It's quite clearly stated, and that's very different from site to site, where it's stated 20% or 30% is needed for social housing, and that there's a price cap on the rent. And that makes it so interesting in these zones. So you will have in this zone social housing, you will have housing for the middle class, and you will have housing for the upper class. But the upper class housing is then privately financed, and then there the situation is a little bit different. But in the zoning, there's quite a clear emphasis on social housing, and that makes it so attractive for us as planners. So in the spatial development plan, these areas are identified, and in the zoning map, and that is in awareness as well, quite interesting. You've got the zoning plan, and overlaid, you've got what we call the Bebauungsplan, the actual one would, if you can translate it into English, the structure plan, where the design issues play a role, access is playing a role. So it's a combined document, which makes it on the one side very complex to read, but on the other side, it is well coordinated. And that's actually the beauty of that plan. I hope I answered your question, because we could actually take up the whole morning on this issue. It's really very interesting. I would like to share my ideas, but we have limited time, unfortunate.
Thank you also for the question. The green spaces that are competing in our competition are, of course, public spaces. So we don't have entries for just green network environmental network. All of these spaces has to be publicly accessible to. It also shows the meaning of environment now in Poland, because we assess just a small percent of investment in green infrastructure and environment. These public spaces, because we have our jury is 40 to 50 people. It's the presence of all chapters and ministers, several ministers, and people from other societies. With this group, each of this space is assessed from a very different perspective for the jury. So all of them are very multifunctional. We have to assess, of course, the environmental or natural processes that they recover, so on. But first of all, we assess in this competition improving the quality of life of people that are using them. So most of these green spaces that we assess in the competition are recreation spaces. We had a period when all our markets were just has removed trees, and after huge quarrel also in press and so on, we don't have any more of such investment. Now we planting trees in the place that we planted them, chopping down before. So it's a very rapid change in the society. I think the NGO's role in this is rather clear in Poland. It affects also the national policies.
Thank you. Now I have other three questions who want to ask you something, and then we will continue the next session. I just want to tell you that this session will be open also all the day here. So who is not involved in the parallel workshop, in the special workshop, can stay here and continue the discussion. Okay, so I have Pedro Garau, Massimo Sartori, and Meyer who want to ask. Yes, first of all, Pietro, and then Massimo. Then.
Thank you, Marichela. My question was addressed to Professor Majda, but hopefully it will be addressed to the other speakers, Well, Professor Majda, I noticed that in one of your initial slides, you showed us the Sustainable Development Goals. And also in your late remarks, obviously your concern is about inequality in cities, large sensibility, and particularly you focus this particular emphasis on people with disabilities. Now, my question to you, and to the other speakers as well, is to what extent your efforts achieve equality in the city, and incidentally also related to the right to the city concept of the new urban agenda, which relates very closely to these issues. To what extent were your efforts helped, aided by the fact that they are straight into target 11.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals? That is, provide accessibility to public spaces, with special regard to children, women, elderly, and people with disabilities. Did this commitment by all governments help you in any way, or would help us all in any way? That is the question. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I skipped the last slide with conclusions. This, of course, it was helpful. Because if we deal from both sides, I would say from bottom up and from manifestos on this scale, it's much easier to talk. It's much easier to change the perspective. Because then from any way you or towards any speaker you look, you have the same point of view. And what we need is a common language as well. When we say some words, we have to be sure that we mean this. And this sustainable development is the example. And if we have defined it in different ways and aiming the same direction, it is really helpful. Otherwise, we can, if we don't understand this definition, we define it in our way. So we have the examples of accessibility that is inaccessible at all, and sustainability which is unsustainable at all. So, yeah, answering for your questions.
I once attended I was part of a working group in the city of Graz, where I live. And, in the steering committee, the first thing that we had to do, because there was a very close cooperation with our Institute of the Blind and, the disabled people. And the first thing that they have done to us, because that was important, each of us had to sit in a wheelchair, and we had to maneuver in the city space and, experience one day how difficult it is to actually have access to really the simplest areas. And then I just realized how difficult it is for a person with disabilities. And then the final conclusion was, with actually minimal measures, you can actually help people. And that actually starting with broadening the sidewalks, making it easier to get on the sidewalks, actually changing the slopes of major access points to public space. And, we then devised a program assisting the town council and with quite clear measures how we can address these issues. And, it was actually, I wouldn't say limited effort, but, with small adaptations to the urban space, it was possible to make it easier for the blind and for the people with limited mobility. That was a fascinating process. And, we are now in Graz in the implementation stage, making the sidewalks broader and helping people to make the urban space more accessible. And, that's fascinating, but that's on the level of design and, making the transport routes easier.
Thank you. Massimo Salvini.
Morning.
a little question for Tomasz Majda. Thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting for me. But I remember your slide about planning system documents. In order to know the real impact on the territory of the plan, I want to ask you if you have prepared and studied the methodology to monitor and to measure the real impact, the outcomes of your plan. Because in the regional plan, in the plan for the residents, is inclusive a space to monitor and to measure the real impact.
Thank you. If you're asking about some links between adaptation plans and implementation, it's a problem implemented in the very framework of this kind of system, because now we have two separate strategic documents. We spend money for protecting something using one strategy, and we spend money to develop using strategy from another sector. So in the same time, we may protect one of forests, and using this strategy from the other, we decide to build a factory in this forest. And we had a case like this. So this integration of system is really dangerous in using this idea. Formally, we have this integration in procedures. So creating the spatial policy, spatial implementation plans, we had to deal with all these sectoral documents. And now adaptation plans are not connected to implementation in planning system.
Yeah, sorry, just 1 minute, very short question, because we are a little bit late and we had to start with the other part of the plenary. So just with my question, but very short, because we can continue in the parallel session.
Another question for Teixeira from Lisbon. Two questions. Both are related to who owns the land which was illegally developed in 1967? And the second question is how municipalities can acquire land for development now?
Okay. In Portugal, municipalities have several ways of having the land to develop. They can buy it in the market, they can expropriate it for public interest. And in this case, there was a legal settlement. And so they could have part of the land because the previous owner that makes legal settlement was obliged by law to give it to the municipality, so that the municipality would have that part of those parts of land that he had still to make the reconversions. And so that was possible on these three ways. It's possible that the municipalities can own the land and after development.
You want to add something? No.
So thanks a lot again to our keynote speakers, and as I told you, now I'm just interesting case studies and is open to a very wide discussion. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Now I will open the other session, a plenary. I would like to invite Michele Talia, President of Italian Institute, and Valeria Lingua. Please.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me? This is a session dedicated to inclusion in European country planning system. We are going a bit long, so we will start with the introduction and then we will continue later. We supposed to have 2 sessions, but in general to convey a comparative analysis of spatial governance and planning system intended as institutional technologies. And this is a reading that Umberto Janin Rivolin, that is one of our hosts, proposed. So planning intended as institutional technologies, allowing the public control over spatial development in different ways and even in different declination according to the country. So the introductive session proposes a critical analysis of the proposal made by INU, by the Italian National Urban Town Planning Institute, for a new planning law in the light of the opinion of some international experts that have participated to different European projects like ESPON, Compass, and Metro projects. And the system of different countries are presented in the continuing of this session, and together with a round table and to discuss the case in relation to how they deal with inclusion in the mechanism for allocating spatial development rights. This morning we also see housing rights and the prevalence of the state versus the market in guided transformation, the ways renewal and regeneration are conceived within the law apparatus, but also within dedicated policies and programs, and the operationality of spatial planning into practice. So within this session, we will have an introduction by our president, Michele Talia. Then there will be a presentation of Riccardo Coratella, that is the general manager of the National Biodiversity Future Center, and the presentation of Umberto Janin Rivolin reading of spatial planning, Umberto Janin from the Politecnico di Torino. And then we will continue with the presentation of national planning systems by Dominic Stent, that is professor of land use and transport planning at the Aalto University in Finland. Okay, it's there. Joaquin Farinos-Dazzi, that is professor of regional geography analysis at the University of Valencia in Spain. Karel Mayer, that is professor at the Czech University of Life Science in Prague. And Gisela Salavin, that is the president of the Hungarian Society for Urban Planning. So I give the floor to Michele Talia for the introduction to this session.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much to Valeria and other colleagues for their contribution to our work on a new reform in urban planning. The ability of European planning systems to be more inclusive towards citizens, households, and key stakeholders depends not only by the governance styles and urban planning practice that have been established over time, but also by the regulatory framework that each country has adopted. Certainly relevant are not only the procedures most frequently used for involving citizens in urban planning decisions, but also the methods adopted for the sizing and design of public space, social housing, and public housing policies, for regulating migration flows, and for supporting migrants in dealing with the main problems of housing, education, health, etc., and so on. Moreover, the relations that are determined in the different national contexts between the specific levels of the national planning system can introduce, depending on the case, elements of rigidity or flexibility that can significantly influence the inclusion process. In the discussion that we will initiate this morning, and which we intend to develop in the coming months with the help of our journals, we will try to address the issue by drawing on the comparative research that has been developed on these topics in recent years. As President of the INU, which recently drafted a proposal for spatial government reform that has just been sent to Parliament, I would like to use the international comparison to support an assessment of our project that is more focused on examining the innovations it is capable of introducing. In more detail, the INU proposals represent the fruit of a collective work which began more than 2 years ago. It introduced some fundamental innovation, which I will try to summarize. First of all, we try to foster the transition from a narrow approach to town planning to a broad and complex notion of territorial government, which includes town planning, building, infrastructure programs, soil protection, hydrogeological management, earthquake and land safety regulations, mobility planning, as well as the management of public interest functionally linked to these matters. The introduction of some international gaps in planning system through the acquisition of tools and administrative behaviors that have long been in use in other countries. aimed, for example, at overcoming the rigid hierarchical and regulatory model of planning. This is aimed above all to foster a proactive and joint control of the most complex urban and territorial transformations and regenerations. Third, the improvement of the efficiency of decision-making process through the introduction of a planning method and the principle of loyal cooperation between local institutions, with the result of mitigating the top-down bias of planning system and replacing the logic of hierarchical and bureaucratic control of conformity with that of coherence. The attribution of a substantial priority in territorial governance to the goals of urban and territorial regeneration and to the constant and containment of soil consumption. The adoption of the principle of equal opportunity and the recognition of the duty to intervene in those areas of the country that are still forced into a condition of unfair and lasting marginality, where even the essential levels of service and citizenship and social rights are not granted to all. Moreover, the INU proposal contains the definition of the general principle by which regional laws regulate and ensure that urban planning of municipalities or unions distinguish structural and strategic contents from regulatory and operational functions. In particular, the latter, which produce conformative effect on private property, is not compulsory and is only activated when relevant or complex operation of urban and territorial transformation may occur. Hence, the introduction in the planning system of a structural and strategic session, which clearly highlight the aims and the objective of municipal spatial government. This peculiar dimension of planning does not assign building rights, nor delimit specific uses, but organize the choice and forecast of the main transformation. With regard to the validity of building forecast and the issue of plan residuals, implementation planning instruments are effective for 10 years from their entry into force. After this period, in the absence of the stipulation of some relevant agreements, the building capacities associated with the building forecast decay. Although in this short contribution, I have not had the opportunity to illustrate all the main contents of our proposal in detail, I would nevertheless like to emphasize that our draft law, if it is accepted, could lead to the abrogation of the General Town Planning Law, which is more than 80 years old, and of the Ordinance on Town Planning Standards, which is more than 60 years old, which is now the fundamental background of the public city project. Thank you very much.
Now, I don't know if it's online. I give the floor to Riccardo Coratella, General Manager of the National Biodiversity Future Center. I don't know if it is online.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, good morning. So thank you, good morning, thank you. Mi sentite?
Sì, ora sì, ecco, prova un po' di nuovo.
Sente?
Sì, ora sì, oh, ce l'abbiamo fatta, fatto a casa, ma ce
Ok.
l'abbiamo fatta.
Bene.
Ecco, abbiamo forse risolto i nostri problemi di audio, quindi andiamo avanti con Riccardo Coratella. Le lascio la parola. So, we solved our problems with the video, so I give the floor to Riccardo Coratella, that is the General Manager of the National Biodiversity Center. So please, Riccardo.
Thank you so much. I think if you can turn off the mic, okay, because I had the return of the sounds on my heart, so it's okay for me now. Do you hear me? Tell me just okay, perfect. So thank you so much for your invitation. I will just apologize from our president Luigi Fiorentino that is not here. He's busy in another meeting, so I'm here to representing the National Biodiversity Future Center. The National Biodiversity Future Center is the most ambitious and the most important project on biodiversity in Italy in the last century. So we are funded by PNRR, so by European funds for about 300 million euro, and we have involved more than 2,000 people in the center. So we have involved 35 universities, all spread around Italy, 7 public research institutions like National Cancer Research of Italy, like Enea, and we have also 7 important private partners inside this project. So the ideas of this project is to monitoring, restoring, conserving, and evaluating the biodiversity in Italy, but also in the Mediterranean spot. So what we are doing is a lot of science. Let's think about that. More than 200 million euros are dedicated to the study of biodiversity and technologies about the biodiversity. from our partner. The most important partner around Italy, we have the Milano Bicocca that is involved in the urban biodiversity. That is the almost the center of our program, with the study about the how the biodiversity has impact in our cities, in the citizen, and especially in the healthcare in Italy. So inside this project, we started with study the history of biodiversity in Italy. As you can understand, Italy is a huge spot for biodiversity due to the location in Europe. With the Mediterranean Sea, we have a lot of biodiversity related to sea biodiversity, but we are also a huge spot of biodiversity about forest and mountain, especially in the Apennine and the Alps in the north of Italy. So what we are looking for is to understand how we can solve some problem that we are fighting in the last 50 years related to the climate change, the circular economy, etc., with biodiversity. So we are doing also a lot of things about the formation of the new generation about biodiversity. What we recognize that this is really important about the biodiversity is to learn, but also give information to the people, to the citizens, to the young generation. We created the first national PhD program on biodiversity that is funded with 4 million euro, and then is led by the University of Palermo. So we are also working, and I was reading in the previous discussion about the involved of this mass, the small and medium enterprises. So Italy is completely full of small and medium enterprises. We don't have so much big enterprises. So we are working with these small and medium enterprises to financing the increasing of TRL, so the develop of prototypes of some robot, etc., about biodiversity with a program that is funded for more than 40 million euro dedicated to mass enterprises. So we are trying to reduce the gap between the universities and the companies. So a big problem in Italy about biodiversity, but in general, is how is big the gap between the universities, the citizens, but especially the small and medium enterprises. So we are trying to reduce these kind of things. About the what we are looking for also, and the previous professor told in the previous arguments, is working about the how our laws can change the idea about biodiversity. So today we are with OECD in the Ministry Plenary in Brussels talking about biodiversity. So what we think is really important to create some laws, I can say some path to follow for increasing the attention about biodiversity. Naturally, with COVID, we recognize that we discovered that biodiversity and the animal or the plants are really important also in our urbans. So a lot of animals come back near to the urban with the when people stayed at home due to the COVID. So what we want to try to do, for example, with project like Forestami, that is a really huge program in the city of Milan, is to recreate forest inside the cities. So as you can understand, the big trees inside the cities can reduce, for example, the temperature during the summer. And this is really nice because Also in Italy, we are fighting the climate change. So summer are becoming really hot in Italy. So it's really important to use the nature to help us to reduce these kind of things. We are working a lot with the University of Pavia about the relation between biodiversity, CITES, and human healthcare. So with the biodiversity, is really we are trying to create a strictly connection between how the impact of the healthcare about, for example, tumor or something like this are related to biodiversity. So reducing of pollution, etc., is really important. What is the point now in Italy with this center? So we recognize that if we don't create something that can be named an economy about biodiversities, can be really hard to fight and continuous this kind of program, because creating an economy around biodiversity is really important to create a sustainable argument on biodiversity also during the future. So we have now this 3.5 program founded by PNRR, but we need also to create some structure that can work alone without this kind of funds. So it's really important. We are also working with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, because we want to learn a lot about tech transfer, but also the creating a startup or spin-off dedicated to biodiversity. So what we are producing now is try to create a cultural change in Italy that can be on the base of the future of biodiversity. Another some things that are really important. So we are creating a huge platform, database platform with Sineca about the biodiversity, because what is really important also in Italy, but I think at European level or worldwide level, is to share data. So it's really important for us to share data with other countries, other European countries, to recognize better how, for example, birds move around Europe, what are the alien species in Italy, etc. So we fought, and we are still fighting with what we call granchio blue. Sorry, I don't know in English how to say granchio blue, but it's really important to prevent and be able to fight with alien species, because can be dangerous also for our agriculture, etc. So one thing that I want to underline is that the biodiversity is not fighting or opposite to agriculture or something like this. Sometimes we read the newspaper that agriculture is not related to biodiversity. The increasing of biodiversity means the reduction of the agriculture, etc. It's not true. It's not true. We need to find the Pareto optimum inside this world. So we need to try to think how I can say we can to try to find the optimum on this world about this. We are also studying the distribution of biodiversity and green spaces within the cities. We started with Milan, and we will move to Rome, starting from the from north to the south. And we also involved more than 130 municipalities around Milan, studying the biodiversity. We are putting some sensors, some specific sensor that we already made in this project for studying biodiversities, and this is really important. So we are also trying, this is important, I heard from the professor from Poland, that the involve of citizens inside this kind of studies is really important, because you know, the difference of culture, the difference of disabilities, etc., are really important, are also sometimes related to a nature that we fight in the wrong method. So, for example, sharing room is plenty. We have a plenty of trees that are with are inside the road, so are very dangerous for people that is working on the road, for people that is driving car. So we need to try to fit better to create cities on a level of citizens, but also respecting biodiversity. So this is very important for us. More things about what we are doing. We are trying to involve Boeri, that is an important architect in Italy, to study how to create green cities, and this is really important. So we are trying to engage a lot of people. Different studies are involved inside the project, from physician to biologist to architecture, so economist, etc. So what I want to say at the end is that the biodiversity in the cities is really important, but are strictly correlated to how the territory is in your country. Is strictly correlated to the law and the administration of your countries. So this is really important. But if we don't create a certain of economy around the biodiversities, can be really hard to you can say convince our politician to follow the path that we are trying to start now. So I hope the north of Europe can be a driver for us to improve what we are doing on biodiversity. I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the flag, so thank you so much. This your intervention was really interesting, because we are dealing with inclusion in this conference, and we faced different aspects of inclusion, but now you open the eyes on the inclusion of the natural environment, and so I think we will have fuel for discussion in next session. So thank you so much. And now I give the floor
Thank
to...
you. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, and I give the floor to Umberto Janin Rivolin, that is a full professor at the Politecnico di Torino. I'll try to share the screen. Okay, and this is the presentation. Ok. L'ha fatta? No. No, è andato solo. Aspetta. Sta facendo stelle invece che duplica. Ok. Aspetta che ritrovo la visualizzazione relatore. Sì, bravo. Non capisco perché non lo fa fare. Ecco, aiuto, che succede? Noi non volevamo la visualizzazione relatore. Aspetta. Sì, ma fa mettere qui c'era... Aiuto, no, adesso me ne è aperta una vuota. Aspetta, questo cosa c'entra? Sto andando sul testo. Eccola. E adesso? Perché mi fa tutto sto casino?
Ha aperto un po' di finestre.
Un po' troppa roba.
Sì, c'è tanta... Allora.
Apri questa, ok. Metti solo quella, sento il relatore.
Sì, allora, io la fa modalità relatore, però la togliamo subito.
Quella non duplica. Bisogna dare le dupliche schermo.
Un attimo.
Ah sì, ora l'ho fatto.
Lì no.
No, guarda, non lo fa qua.
Allora lo fa e da qua.
Ecco, adesso dopo togliere.
Bisogna togliere la visualizzazione relatore.
Perché alla-
Ah, è qua, ok.
Non si vede più sotto.
questa è duplica presentazione. Ecco qua.
Però di qua,
Sono a
ah,
posto?
ok.
Sì, ci siamo. Volevo... Sì, le ho nascondo questo qua così.
Sì, però posso ancora fare
Sì, e va.
il laser qua.
Puntatore
Meraviglia.
ok, vai.
Perché non visualizzo mai.
Però va, funziona, successiva.
Doveva.
Ok, sì, funziona. Ok.
Okay.
Vai.
Sorry for the inconvenience. So, good morning also from my side, and thank you for this invitation to this interesting meeting. Well, what I would like to do is simply to present the result of so this typology of European planning system comes from some research that we made in the DIST, my department in Politecnico di Torino, the university where I came from. And well, there are two researches that are both drawn upon the working material of two ESPON projects, the ESPON Compass project, ESPON Super projects. But so one, the main one, let's say the one on the working material Compass project is about try to understand the capacity for public control in a comparison among European systems. And the second one is to, let's say, verify this typology in the light of a more, let's say, objective aspect, which is land consumption. And then a few words of conclusion. So, okay.
No, questo sì.
Okay. Yes, so the first ESPON project that was the ESPON Compass was his aim was to the comparison of 39, well, no less than 39 national spatial planning systems in Europe. Then, yes, with particular attention to the changes in the last 20 years, more or less. The project was concluded in 2018, and paying attention to the influence of the European Union. But I repeat that I don't present the conclusion, I don't present this Compass project, but what we found among, let's say, the working material of this project to try to work on the public control capacity. So this also is, if I guess, is difficult to read, but are 10 questions that, well, let's say the Compass project was built on the questionnaires that were submitted to 39 experts that also had should include other people in their country. So among this questionnaire, we select 10 questions, and of course the 39 answers to the question to understand the two aspects, particularly that are how land use and transformation rights are allocated in each country. And the second aspect is the prevalence of the state or the market in spatial development decision. So two aspects that were somehow scored. So in the first score, let's say, list of scores were
given in the ways of allocation, land use, and transformation rights between the ideal conformative model, and we mean for conformative model, where yes, transformation rights are allocated through general binding plans that decide any detailed transformation, and the ideal performative model, which is that plans are non-binding and transformation are decided case by case. So these two extremes and a series of, let's say, intermediate situation to give discourse. The other, let's say, vertical score was given to understand the prevalence of the state on the market in spatial development decision between an ideal state-led spatial development and ideal market-led spatial development, and with score in between. So this is the situation that we had, and we simply position each each planning system according to the scores obtained in the let's say conformative and performative at the horizontal level and vertical level. So market-led, state-led is a bit, sorry for mouse is a bit. So after this positioning, we simply clusterized the group of countries. Thank you. Sure. We clusterized the group of countries, obtained this was supposed to be the label, but something has happened, never mind. Any case, we see the, yes, the label are being substituted for this picture. I don't know why. Any case, I more or less I remember them. So the cluster A was the state-led systems. The cluster B, so the group B were we labeled them as the market, let's say, neo-performative market-led systems. These are the conformative systems, all the conformative systems, the proto-conformative system, the group D, because are the more, let's say, more particularly conformative, and the group E are labeled as the misunderstood performative systems, in the sense that they were performative, but for certain reasons, for the different reasons, they were completely market-led, on the contrary of the usual performative and non-performative systems. So this is a bit the situation, and this is the, let's say, the map. This again was supposed to be the label with the same labels, and as you see, there's also a certain, let's say, macro-regional consistency in this. So yes, these are the state-led. The blue one are the neo-performative market-led. The brown one are the conformative, proto-conformative, and the green one that are only 3 countries, Poland, Cyprus, and Malta, are the misunderstood neo-performative systems. I would like to open a side on this since these days are dedicated also to the law proposal that Michele presented earlier. Would like to show the position of Italy. The position of Italy is here, which means that it's among the currently is among the, let's say, we've said the conformative system, and is not, well, is in one of the, let's say, best performing, well, conformative system with, say, less market-led development. Is, I think, having read and having, yes, listened the proposal by INU that there are reasons to understand, to think that for the allocation of right, there would be a shift among the group B at least, so a bit an upgrade. And of course, is only we are in the domain of hypothesis, but we can also imagine, guess that would be also an improvement from the, let's say, state also to become a country belonging to the group A. But is of course is an hypothesis. But I think that the shift from C to B would be probable, because we have seen that for the allocation of rights, especially for the big project, the important intervention is somehow without the binding plan, let's say, yeah, preventing binding plan. Close the aside. Yes. We have seen this. Well, okay, this only is the second ESPON project, which is the super that was so sustainable urbanization, so was to provide evidence and recommendation on how sustainable land use can be promoted in Europe. Okay, that was the super project, research project, and what we were interested in this project for the fact that was calculated among the other elements, the other aspect, the increase in net land consumption in the last 20 years. And this was, yes, draw on the current land cover database. Okay, what we simply did in this case was to you can see in the last column the increase. We calculated the increase of the change, let's say, land consumption, because it's not only increase, can be decreased in certain case, like where minus is indicated. So between the surface, the area in each of previous 39 countries. So the area that was with the other, of course, we consider this also, let's say, comparing with other variables like the variation of population in the same period, the variation of GDP, etc. And so try also to explain why there were this change. We discovered somehow, so calculating the average increase in land consumption in the last 20 years and let's say the standard deviation for each of the type of system that we seen previously. So these are the type A, B, C, D, E. And as you can see, apart from E, which is statistically less stable, let's say, being only 3 countries, in the other case, there is a certain, is a clear, let's say, somehow rather clear, say, inversal proportionality in the sense that in the group A, we label them the state-led development. Standard deviation, the average increase is low, and the standard deviation also is very, say, strict, very little. And these go to are almost equal the average increase in A, B, but the open, of course, the standard deviation, the more is open, for instance, in D, the protoconformative, and the more means that countries are subject to different variables, because of course this is not different variables that are in the case, for instance, of state-led system are very let's say contained somehow. So is a verification of the let's say usefulness of this typology, and the say in the at the end is what we concluded. The fact that, first of all, as institutional technologies aimed at allocating land use rights, spatial development, spatial planning systems are one main reason for differentiation in public control spatial development. So we are used to think that, let's say, public control is something, let's say, almost by chance, but no, is something that is, of course, is related to different, very multiple factors, but the planning system is important in this and is not indifferent. Particularly, is important the type of technology this system, let's say, put in practice. Second point, land consumption tend to be inversely proportional to the capacity for public control of spatial development that different types of planning systems can exhibit. Is almost obvious, but not so obvious to demonstrate, to show it, let's say, in reality. Again, we are led to think that things go in various ways because variables are many in this field, but there is a certain continuity. The third is that systems that allocate use land use right on the basis of case-by-case evaluation of development projects instead of binding plans tend to ensure a better capacity for public control of spatial development and less land consumption. This is interesting to, there's a debate on this. Of course, there are different variables again, but interesting to see that there's a certain continuity case-by-case evaluation, and power at the end is a bit counter, let's say, counterdeductive, but a case-by-case evaluation seems to empower the capacity, the public capacity, the capacity of public control. I would like to add, let's say, a fourth conclusion, that is what I said before, the fact that as far as Italy is concerned, this law proposal of legislation prepared by INU could in somehow certainly improve the capacity of the let's say state, the public control on spatial development. Okay, these are the references if someone is interested to let's say to read more in detail this research, and I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Umberto, for your intervention. Thank you also for your comments on our proposal for the national law. And now we go through a short coffee break, but then we will discuss all this issue about inclusion of the environment and land consumption and the capacity of the state to work on land rights with other different countries. Now we just stop of 10 minutes and then we will meet 5 minutes and then we will meet at 12 here to continue the discussion. So thank you so much for your intervention.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, do you hear me? Hola?
Thank you for the answer in any case.
Oh.
You are attentive participant. Thank you.
Hi, Dominic.
Marinos, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we can hear you.
I can see you also.
Can you try to talk a bit just to understand if we can hear your voice in this room?
Okay. I don't know if my micro is.
Yeah,
it's good.
You can try to go a little bit closer to the microphone because I don't really hear you. Okay.
The desk, computer.
Okay, thank you. So we start this session. I invite Dominic Stead to give his presentation and also to introduce you. You are at the Aalto University and I will present part of this session that is inclusion in spatial planning system. This is the second round. We already had around a first introduction by Michele Talia, our president of the National Town Planning Institute, that presented the proposal for a new planning law, and Umberto Janin Rivolin that illustrated the results of two ESPON projects and the possible exploitation of this new planning law in terms of trying to upgrade our planning system to something, I would say, better, but we will see in the practice. Now, this is a continuing session in which we will discuss the experience of other countries. We start from Dominic Stead from the Aalto University. I'll try to share the presentation. And I don't know if you can see it. No, di nuovo. So, okay. No. Is it okay for you, this visualization? Okay, so I give you a laptop and the floor.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Valeria, thank you for introducing me. Michele, thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. I have a short presentation. I hope I can fit it in 15 minutes. I want to Do you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Okay. So I have a short presentation of around, I hope, 15 minutes, reflecting on some of the work that I've done in the last 20 to 25 years comparing planning systems. I'm not going to talk about the planning system in Finland, which is where I work, which is where I've worked for the last 3 years. I worked in the Netherlands for 20 years before that. I did my education in the UK. I'm not going to talk about those 3 countries, but I'm going to talk about my reflections on comparing planning systems, what we know about planning systems and where planning systems are going. And the main focus of what I want to tell you about is, first of all, how can we compare planning systems? How can we understand them? And I want to propose to you 3 dimensions of comparison. And these are my reflections on the work that I've done together with many others, including people like Umberto and other people in the audience, actually, on a number of different projects and reflect on those. And I want to propose to you, if I have time, what I would say are the kind of main types of planning policy instruments that planners can use as part of their toolbox. And this is part of a publication which I produced a few years ago. Let's just remind ourselves of one of the definitions of spatial planning. Of course, there are many different definitions that we can refer to, but this is one which comes from the 1997 Compendium of Spatial Planning Systems and Policies, which talks about spatial planning referring to the methods used by mainly the public sector to influence the distribution of activities in space, both now and in the future. It's undertaken with the aims of creating a more rational territorial organization of land uses and linkages between these land uses. And this is important because there are strong linkages between land uses, and these are also important aspects to consider when we are planning the distribution and the patterns of future development. It's also about balancing demands for development and the need to protect the environment, and that's something we heard about in one of the presentations earlier. and achieving social economic objectives, which relates back to the objectives of the conference here yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The three dimensions of comparing spatial planning that I want to introduce you to are these ones. And in the work that I've looked at and been involved in many years, there are a number of ways that we can think about how to compare if we look at, especially at national spatial planning arrangements. We can compare the dimensions which influence the way in which planning is organized. We can compare the dimensions which describe the main characteristics of the operation of planning in practice. And we can compare the dimensions which illustrate the impacts of planning. And I'll explain each of these to you in more detail. So the first one, the dimensions which influence the way planning is organized. There are many ways in which planning systems differ across Europe. And the reasons for many of these differences lie in some of these dimensions, which I want to introduce. There are important legal and constitutional arrangements which are sometimes quite specific to regions and to countries. There are important societal values and norms which underlie governance in general, but underlie spatial planning governance in specific. And then there are a whole range of other dimensions which are less considered in research on spatial planning, but are also very much important. And these are things like the levels of wealth in a country. These influence how planning operates, the resources which are attached to planning, and so on. The levels of demographic change are important to shaping the planning system. Patterns of land ownership are important for how spatial planning operates. The profile of industrial activity, the importance of different sectors of economic activity shape planning and its operation. Its topography influences spatial planning, and the scarcity of land. Think of countries which are very densely populated, for example. These have different approaches quite often to the way in which planning is organized. And then, secondly, there are dimensions which describe the main characteristics of the operation of planning in practice. And examples of this are the extent to which plans are binding. In other words, the extent to which they are legally binding. The next one is related to the function of plans. What do the plans set out to do? Are they visionary? Do they set out a kind of a general idea of future development? Are they strategic in nature? Are they framework plans, or are they regulatory? In other words, do they carry the force of law? Another way which we can think about the dimensions that describe the characteristics and the operation of planning is to look at policy instruments. And if I have time, I want to say something more about these instruments. How can we define them? What do we understand by these? But another aspect which describes the main characteristics of the operation of planning is actually the scope of planning. What does planning set out to do? What kind of topics, what kind of themes can be included in plans? Can policy coordination arrangements in planning be included and developed? And then one of the other dimensions which I want to include here, which it's received much less attention, but I think is also important, is the calibration of policy instruments. In other words, not just to look at the types of instruments themselves, but the extent to which where they're applied, to whom they're applied, and their severity. And let me say something more about the calibration when I talk about these different types of policy instruments, and hopefully things will become a bit clearer what I mean there by calibration. And then this third dimension of comparison that I want to talk about relates to the ways in which we can measure the impacts of planning. And one is a very simple view of planning in relation to physical territorial development. We can look at the relation between the content of plans and the physical development of space, which gives us an indication of the possible influence of planning. But of course, it doesn't tell us everything, because what we don't know is what would have happened without the plan anyway. But there are also some other ways that we can think about illustrating the impact of planning, and that is influences either on local or national planning discourses beyond the territory itself. In other words, does planning introduce new terms? Does it introduce new ideas, new concepts, which take root in other territories or in other disciplines and in other political debates outside spatial planning? And these are also ways in which planning and the impact of planning can be measured. So those are a whole range of different types of ways of comparing spatial planning. If I have time, I would like to talk about something more specific now, and that is these different types of policy instruments. There seems to be some confusion when we discuss policy instruments. What do we mean? I've been in several projects where policy instruments, in some people's mind, relate to the type of plans. In other words, the kind of the extent of different plans, or the nature of different plans. But what I'm talking about when I talk about policy instruments is something related to this book by Christopher Hood from 1986, who sets out four main types of policy tools that governments use. And what I want to do is try to apply this to spatial planning. And he introduces this mnemonic, this shorthand of four policy tools according to the acronym NATO. He talks about tools related to nodality, and tools of nodality are information-based tools. And when we're talking about spatial planning, there are lots of tools that planners use and that planners can use related to nodality. These are about information, about advice, about persuasion. There are, secondly, tools of authority, and authority are essentially things which we often associate with planning. These are about regulations, about what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is permitted under certain circumstances. The third type is treasure. These are fiscal measures, economic measures. These relate to taxes, subsidies, and so on, which affect the nature of territorial development and also have a strong relevance to planning. And the fourth one is organization. And this is a little bit more difficult to understand, I think. And in Hood's definition, he talks about organization as direct action by government using its stock of land, buildings, staff, equipment, and individuals with all kinds of skills that they may have in government's possession. So in a way, organization and organization tools come in many different forms, but these can be things that are provided directly on land by government at different levels. And we can think of a whole range of different examples: public transport services, streets, public parks, museums, waste disposal facilities, prisons, crematoria. How do these have an influence on spatial planning? Well, these physical interventions affect land use decisions. Some can catalyze new development by their very nature, and some can inhibit development. Think of a cemetery, think of a prison. What kind of land uses would choose to locate close to those? Some would and some wouldn't. So these are also important tools when it comes to thinking about spatial planning. And then a further distinction I want to make. So we have 4 basic tools here at our disposal as people interested in spatial planning. But there's a further distinction, and that is the distinction between procedural tools and substantive tools. We can use these tools either to affect the process of making the plan. In other words, we can kind of use these tools when we're developing a new plan. Think of participation, think of experiments to try to show how things could develop. Think of fiscal measures which can promote part of the process. But there are also substantive aspects of using these tools as well. And these substantive tools, these are the ones which help to enable or enact the plan. In other words, to move from the idea of the plan itself to the territorial development, to the physical development. So a few examples here, just by way of making things a little bit more, a bit clearer. We can think of nodality tools in a procedural sense. Public consultation would be one example. An authority tool would be the assessment of a plan. A treasure tool would be some kind of incentive to participate. So an economic measure, but it helps in the procedure of making the plan. And an organization tool would be an urban experiment. Allow things to happen in a certain way, a direct intervention which shows what could happen in the longer term as a result of physical intervention. And then if we look at the substantive side, we can think of a few other examples. So an example of a substantive tool, a nodality tool related to substantive aspects, then a spatial vision would be an example. An authority tool would be protection status for green space, for example, or for heritage. A treasure tool would be a land tax, say on greenfield. And an organization tool would be some kind of other physical intervention, I think it would say underneath there. So that was very quickly my overview of how can we compare plans and what do we mean by policy instruments.
Thank you, Dominic. You didn't tell in your presentation that you work years on this topic of planning, of comparing planning system, and you also did a lot of publication that are our reference on the topic. And this give us also the compass for our discussion today. So thank you so much. You was the first because we were sure you would add this contribution on the presentation of a compass for the other planning system. So now I give the floor to Joaquin Farenos Dazi. So please, I interrupt the sharing so that you can share your screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I try to share my slides. Can you see? Can you see the slide, please? Do you hear me? Hello?
You can try to share the screen
Okay.
now. So Joaquim Farinos Dazi is Professor of Regional Geography Analysis at the University of Valencia, Spain. Now we can see your presentation, so I give you the floor.
Okay. Many thanks. First, to give thanks for the invitation. I would like to attend in Naples, but it was not possible because I think the reasons. So I tried to adjust in my case to that I was requested to reply on my speech about mainly 4 or 5 important questions. The presentation is too long, so I concentrate in some specific ideas. And if someone is
Farinos, can you speak closer to the laptop, because we can hear not so good. The audio is not so good. So.
Can you hear me a bit better or not? Hello? Hi?
Not so clear.
So I don't know how we can solve this problem. Probably I can take the micro enhance, but do you hear me?
It's changing something.
Okay, is possible.
Now it's better. Yeah, now it's better.
Well, okay, I am yeah, with the camera in hands. Okay. Yeah. So I hope you can see the presentation. I was saying that the presentation was initially longer, but I tried to concentrate in very specific ideas. And if anyone can ask or is interested, I can share the presentation. 6 or 7 points, but I'll be quick on each one. Basically, the first one is what about this new idea of institutional technologies as new legislation for the spatial planning, urban and spatial planning here in Spain, and in common understanding, I can imagine, with some Mediterranean countries. About the legal essentials on Spain, probably we should remember several laws in land laws, basically in 1956. Afterwards, innovation in 1976, because it's the first time the spatial planning was officially referred is as competence, as activity of planning for administrations in a national law. But things were changing in 1997 because the Constitutional Court was deciding that the urbanism and spatial planning will be only on hands of regional governments. So the national government can't produce plans on spatial planning and urbanism. Despite this, as the land is a good public good for the interest general, for the general interest, sorry, then the ministry responsible could make some initiatives from legislative point of view in order to ensure this kind of general interest for every people in Spain. At the end of this long time, we had a new law in 2015 that at this moment is trying to be amended in order to solve any kind of problems we are to face with, because the procedural the procedural elements are so complex and difficult, and it is not easy to confront the private and public interest in this field of urbanism and spatial planning. So I'll be quick on this. This is the usual procedure in which the plans are approved. It's a conceptualization from the definition of objectives, this kind of diagnostic and alternatives, and the selection and implementation of such alternatives in a very complex, very long process. That is how the strategic impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment is included in the procedure of approval of plans, because it's a binding procedure according with the European directive. So the effect of this inclusion in the procedure is all different autonomous regions are following more or less similar way, similar path, in order to approve the plans. Trying to give answer or reply to the questions the organizers ask, I will or I could reply. Mechanism for allocating a spatial development. Well, in Spain is a composite state, so there are several levels: national, regional, and local. Each one with different kind of competences and powers and resources. And at the end, mainly the main idea is the use of land finally is planned by public administration. Which ones? It depends. Basically from regional governments, but this is a pretty difficult to explain because it's not really like this. The big issue that we are facing since a long time ago, imagine as some Mediterranean countries, is that planning is modifying rights to use the property. So as property is the cornerstone of our legal system, so it's really difficult to promote this kind of well-addressed or well-intentioned planning, because the private interests are so many times many conflictual. In addition, the cost for development of the land is paid with these capital gains that the change of the classification of the soil of the land the administration could promote. So in Spanish wording, plusvalías, this is a capital gain provided only because the change of status of the land, non-developable or developable, suelo no urbanizable o suelo urbanizable in Spanish definition. And these gains are very, very unequal shared between the owners of the land and the properties and the administration. In this average that you can see in the screen, then 90% correspond is for the owners, and only the 10% is for the administration, public administrations. That was leading, as is really well known in Spain, to the speculation, this kind of how this kind of dark partnerships between developers, constructors, and local authorities in order to promote the change from non-developable to developable land. So was motivating in 2008, following the real estate bubble crash, a new law in 2008 in order to avoid this classification of non-developable land. Instead of this, the legislator would to use rural land instead non-developable land. Was the consequence of this change was the consolidation, that is an important question, consolidate the place or importance of projects replacing or substituting plans as instruments of planning. And In fact, well, at this moment, the current reform is trying to find better sharing capital gains for public purposes. But in fact, it's really difficult to do that because the doctrine consolidated by the Constitutional Court has reinforced this distribution of 90-10%. So this is the really difficult framework in which we can provide some modification of or new regulations in order to make more appropriate and more implementable spatial and urban planning. This is theoretical approaches that mainly I'll try to explain that institutional framework and legal securities are basic for the good performance in a state of rights. But the question is because this probably too technocratical top-down approach is contested each time more intensively from the other local governments and mainly for stakeholders and populations. So that means that progressively also explained because this new binding obligation from the Aarhus Pact and the public participation law, increasingly the public participation is more included in this process of elaboration of plans. So at the end, this is a good question because planning could be more democratic. But in fact, in some cultures, as in the Spanish case, or at least in some autonomous regions, more south-oriented, more Mediterranean coast, tourism-oriented, is that this kind of flexibilization can be confused or can lead to a deregulation or a regulation for private funds and big investors' interest instead the general interest. That is the question some bibliography was trying to explain as this the dark side of the strategic projects. For instance, was argued for by I don't remember the name, sorry. It's a politologist, well, probably I can remind after. The main purpose is to insert flexibility in the procedures of elaboration of spatial planning. And I insist in this topic of procedures because in Spain we have not planned as such. This empty space is occupied basically for architects and from a regulative point of view for lawyers, specialists in administrative and public law. So, in fact, we can have the same understanding about the spatial planning that in other parts of Europe, as probably Dominique was explaining in his intervention. For this reason, I am concentrating my speech in this kind of procedural approach. Not so substantive, because at the end this is in the basis. This is a kind of sustainable democratic development to face the ecological transition. But the problem is okay, this is the basis, but how we can do that? And for this reason, we are trying to modify the regulation in which the plans are approved, and mainly how could be implemented or applied Why at this moment the governments, Spanish government also is trying to insert flexibility, modifying the environmental assessment procedures, make easier, shorter this kind of technocratic or participated or new rules to approve the plans. Mainly in this context of economic crisis following the pandemic and so on, is facilitate business development and investment for economic development. And this is very important in some countries, as Spain, also as in Greece, or in Cyprus probably, or in Croatia, or in Italy in part, because our economies are not so strong, not so diversified, so construction, tourism, consumer trade, and so on are important sectors for our economy. And in fact, the spatial planning rules can limit these possibilities to develop new opportunities of business. A clear example in Spain at this moment is, for instance, the question of renewable solar plants in installations in rural areas, for instance. The second and more positive approach is that of make the process more rational, allowing at the same time the legal security. And this is the way in which the proposed reform of the national law wants to deepen. And
minutes more, so
okay, ways on which urban renewal and regeneration are conceived. Okay, basically from the Spanish Transformation and Resilience Recovery Plan, following the regional funds and recover plan of Europe and New Green Deal, in order to try to make these changes, new orientations possible. In fact, this change from the urban sprawl, more developed land, to urban rehabilitation, regeneration, and renewal was already stated in 2013, following the real estate bubble clash. And right now, more recently, there is another way in which we can provide some innovation in this process. That how is the case the Spanish urban agenda approved in 2019. It's a reference framework because the ministry has not competence, but can provide technical support and afterwards also economic support using this Spanish Transformation and Resilience Recovery Plan in order to engage the local authorities to provide new instruments for recovering the municipalities. They were based, these plans, usually in cities, but or part of the big cities, but right now is moving or trying to move to metropolitan areas, urban regions, and rural urban spaces. It's important to say that the test fire of spatial planning at sub-regional scale, that is the most important one, is considering that the spatial planning is not binding for regional governments. The municipal from local authorities is binding to provide a urbanist plan. So the way in which we can develop this new spatial planning in Spain is if we can coordinate very well the interest at local municipal level with the strategic visions or more non-so binding objectives of spatial planning and regional sub-regional level. The way in which we can proceed, or in fact are proceeding in order to make easy this coordination and be more practical between urbanism and spatial planning is following two ways. First is making a differentiation between the main structural elements of the territory that are included in a spatial planning, and the other that could be more particular, more detailed, that could be managed by the stakeholders. So this has its parallelism between the spatial planning perspective, las estrategias territoriales o las spatial visions at regional level, and projects as the way in which people can apply these guidelines or these principles in order to provide or give answer to the necessities of the territory. This is an increasing way in which the experts, technicians, legislation is moving in Spain. The second question, well, at this moment, I was talking about the urban agenda, and in relation with this, the new European Regional Development Fund objectives 5.1 and 5.2 that are related with this kind of territorial integrated strategies. The second one, and I am finishing now, is to avoid the blocking of planning activity of the administrations, because it's necessary. How to do that? At this moment, the main problem is procedural, because we are providing a new reform in which we can make possible the plan could be not totally annulled. That is, from a juridical point of view in Spain, the urban spatial plans can be modified or can be partially avoided or annulled. Is full annulation. So we are trying to provide some legal dispositions in order that this annulment could be only partial, not for all space for which the plan applies, give the possibility for new terms in order to correction errors or defects, maintain the derivative planning of this spatial plan that could be annulled, and so on. So is the big demand since at least I think 8 years ago, and right now is this reform ongoing. Was formulated in the Boletín Oficial del Estado in April 5 this year, and in this moment is in period of amendments. At the end, this reform also, and this is
finishing
the last slide, yes. This try to improve also administrative coordination, because in the procedure of approval of the plans, we have the regional and local plans need sometimes the sectoral reports coming from the Spanish ministries. So this is a very problematic situation, and then because at the end the plan can't be approved if you have not these reports by the sectoral ministries. And right now there is a official intention to provide a platform in order to make more transparent, clear, and shorter the procedure for provide this kind of sectoral reports needed, binding for the final approval of the plans. And finally, also the possibility the national law not hind the inter-administrative cooperation procedures at local and regional administration, because it's contrary to the national law. That has not sense, because limiting the local cooperation or inter-regional cooperation. That's all. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Joaquin. Thank you. Okay. So I ask Karl Mayer to come and just a few comments, because the Compass project that Umberto presented, and also this attempt in comparative planning also was in 2018-19, so before the pandemic. And so it was interesting to see that you can come that many things have changed since then. So there were the Spanish urban agenda, the recovery plan, and also a new land law. So this is interesting to see how things have evolved since there. So we will discuss after, we will have a short discussion. Now I give the floor to of the Czech University of Life Science in Prague.
Is it? Yeah, now it works. Thank you for a kind invitation, and I'll try to squeeze my presentation in time as much as possible. And I'll try, the theme, as you can see, is spatial planning in Central European countries. Not all of them. There will be another presentation on Hungary, which is not included here. And this will deal with frameworks which are similar and practices which are diverse. And in the second part, I try to focus on Czech case of spatial planning reforms as they occurred lately. This is a very big table which tries to compare Austrian, Czech, German, Polish, and Slovak systems of spatial planning in terms of requisite and tools on a national, regional, municipal, and detailed local plan level. And the lesson from that is that basically all levels are presented. There is a difference between unitary and federal states. So Austria and Germany have two levels of federal and state or provincial planning, but the names are different. If you look into the contents of the plans, they are quite similar. So it seems that it is similar. It's one family of planning traditions, which comes from Austrian monarchy, partly from Germany, and so forth. So it seems that everything is similar. If we go further and look at how what happens when a builder wants to build something. So in Germany, it is rather complex principle, which uses, of course, land use plan, which is present in all the countries. And then it distinguishes between it is urban development area, it is not, and so forth and so forth. What is important that in every cases, you have the Bebauungsplan, it's a detailed plan, which exists in all that trajectories. And also there is a planning contract, which collects some money for the development in favor of public interest. Austria is quite similar. It is not so complex, but again, you have regulatory plans and planning contracts there. If you go to Czech Republic, on the first side, it is not so different because again, you have a regulatory plan, which is a detailed plan. and you also find planning contract there. But the reality is that most of developments occur without regulatory plan and without planning contract, which is not obligatory. And even if it is not urban development area, then a builder goes immediately to building office and applies for building permit. So there is no other regulations but land use plan. So this was the first part, and the lesson from that is that if it looks similarly, the reality can be totally different simply but by not using some instruments of planning, as it is the case of Czech Republic and also Slovakia, when regulatory plans are quite rare. In Czech Republic has more than 4,000 municipalities, and existing regulatory plans can be something like 140. So basically, Prague has a single regulatory plan which will expire soon. So this is the Dichtung und Wahrheit. It's dreams and reality of planning in different countries under the same pattern of regulations. And next point I want to show is, and I'll be following what was presented by Umberto about ESPON Compass. ESPON Compass, which followed European planning systems since the year 2000, identified two general trends which are shared by European countries. And the first is that the planning competencies are have been decentralizing to regional level, and also local was receiving increasing role. And the second general trend, which was found as common, is that processes tend to be simplified and streamlined. And there were some recommendations or say the ways of efforts of reforms in European countries, and this was transparency and citizen engagement, sectoral policy coordination, facilitating value capture from development, and digital technology. And I'll now finish with showing these four homeworks for Czech spatial planning, how they are, in fact, how they are realized. As for the transparency and citizen engagement, since the law from 2006, all planning documents are available via internet, so they are published easily. And the power and mostly capacity of public initiatives is increasing generally, not generally, because in deprived regions, the capacity of public initiatives is very low. So there is big difference between what happens in Prague, in well-established parts of Prague, and what happens in some periphery. Legal frameworks, and this is not very nice story, moves rather towards restricting the involvement of publics, and it is under the heading of speeding up and streamlining the process. So public initiatives are considered, and they are also presented in media as something like putting sand into the wheels of planning. Coordination of sectoral policies and their integration. We still have the duality of strategic and in inverted commas, territorial planning, which makes the coordination quite difficult. I think that we are sharing the problem with Spain and Hungary and other countries. Amendments of plans are mostly initiated and driven by developers, and planning is rather reactive than proactive. So it is not visionary at all. Since 2023, we have a transportation and energetic building office, which should coordinate big linear investments in national significance. And the experience is not very very long. So it's difficult to say whether this is not erosion of spatial planning. Value capture from development, the first attempt was by the law 2006, when there was a possibility to make planning contract on the basis of a regulatory plan. As regulatory plans are rather exceptional, so this was not effective. And now the new planning law will be established this year in July. And it says that it's possible to require planning contact for specific sites designated in local land use plan. Last but not least, digital technology. We have since 2006 planning database and analysis in GIS. They are continuously updated and revised every 4 years. Since last year, there is a big action of standardizing the GIS data used in land use planning, and planning and building law emphasizes that the process to apply and to issue a building permit will be online. We are very curious how it happens. Thank you for listening, and thank you.
Thank you, Karel. Thank you so much. Thank you also for this overview, not only on the Czech, but also on the other countries. So it has been really interesting. And yeah, some issue, as we were saying, as public participation and digital innovation are starting to be on the foreground, but slowly, but we will see. So now I will introduce our last speaker, that is Gida Salamin, the president of the Hungarian Society for Urban and Spatial Planning. I will not interrupt the connection because we will present also his intervention. And yeah, we invited you because you also studied a lot the changes of the planning system, and the Hungarian case.
Thank you very much. It is always very hard to be the last one before the lunch. Am I the last one before the lunch? Okay, how much time do I have? I wouldn't like to overgo 10 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. It was a big honor yesterday to get this invitation to present a little bit about the Hungarian spatial planning system. I try to be short. Of course, it's very complicated issue, especially for me. In my career, I used to work more in the planning practice, especially at national level, but I also had some European Union level experiences in relation to the ESPON program and also the territorial agenda adopted by the Hungarian EU presidency. But during the last couple of years, I'm more dealing with analyzing and doing research, like as an academic of planning systems, Hungary, Central Eastern Europe, and the comparison of various planning systems. So when starting to talk about the spatial planning system of Hungary, I think there is one very, very important fact that must be underlined to understand in a European context this situation. After 1990, the change of political regime after the collapse of the socialist system. In Hungary, there was a sort of denying planning, because planning was something communist practice. And we wanted to get rid of every single planning. And this is why the consequence of such an attitude is still very clear in Hungary, as the planning policy and planning profession is not so strong. Sometimes it is rather, sorry to say, a toy of different decision makers, politicians, and different groups of professionals. Hungary is a relatively small country. It has only 90,000 square kilometers, but it has very, very huge regional differences within the country. And its urban system is very, very monocentric. And the governmental structure is also very, very centralized. So after the political change, at first, actually two different regimes of spatial planning emerged. One was the rather regulatory land use oriented planning, which was actually an idea, an orientation to consider spatial planning as a technical process, and mainly considered as a policy which regulates the constructions. This is a very strong orientation, and that land use planning is quite separated from the other approach, which was the spatial development planning. It emerged only at the end of the 90s as a result of the influence of the European Union, because when we could forget about the Moscow approach, we recognized that, oh, come on, in Europe, planning is something different. And if we want to join the European Union, there is a must to prepare plans for the development. Once again, these two regimes are quite different. Now they are regulated in two different laws. One is about the built environment, the other one is on regional development and spatial planning. And these different approaches can be experienced at various levels in Hungary. If you try to localize the Hungarian spatial planning system, we can use the most classical typology of spatial planning practices. Maybe Dominic Stead already mentioned this one. And you can see here with yellow indication that Hungary was categorized in two categories. I think it is quite obvious. The physical land use oriented planning was considered as part of the so-called land use management tradition, or the land use management model classified by the European Compendium of Spatial Planning. And the more development-oriented planning was rather connected to the regional economic model. What is quite a new recent phenomenon that in European literature we read quite often and experience that there is a shift. For example, two ASPOM projects analyzed the national spatial planning systems, how they shifted from one category to the other. And maybe that was also the Compass project as well, but maybe another ASPOM project. So in most countries, the direction is typically going towards the comprehensive integrated model and to the regional economic one. In Hungary, in the last couple of years, we experienced rather moving towards the urbanism. Planning, especially the physical land use oriented planning and city level planning is getting to be closer to the urbanism, more architecture favored orientation. This year, no, actually last year, a new law was adopted, law for architecture and local level planning. Spatial planning is included in that plan, which is really strange. Okay, to describe a little bit more the Hungarian spatial planning system, let me use another comparative model of which in many senses can be connected to what actually Dominic just introduced. Last year I published that so-called planning map, which is a tool to compare different planning systems, different specific plans through 4 dimensions. One dimension is geography. It is about actually the territorial entities of planning, where you can see close to the center the local level and towards the higher levels, and also the administrative territories distinguished from the functional spaces. The scope of the planning, so what are the topics and issues which are addressed by the planning practice. This making difference between the I have to hurry up. So you can read. I will go fast. I cannot joke about it before the lunch. So yeah, the other one is the instruments. I liked so much Dominic's introduction of how instruments of planning can be distinguished. And the last one is actually the mission, the why a certain planning activity is taking place. What is the real motivation, and what is the policy, what is the goal of it. To make it a little bit more understandable, I inserted the 4 ideal typologies of European models of spatial planning. So this is actually a visualizing tool, which can help to make visual distinction between various planning approaches. Well, in case of Hungary, this physical land use planning, you can see that surprisingly we have, in terms of geography, we have physical land use plan also at national level, and we used to have also on regional level, but it will be ended in the near future. And of course, at local level, it is fully only about administrative territories, legally defined territories, and it's dealing with only with this physical space. And if you look at the instruments, it's only regulation. And regarding the mission, it is really only to provide possibilities and especially limitations for construction. So this is, if you just look at the other spatial planning approach, which is the strategic development-oriented planning, you can see that the missions and the goals are completely different than the previous one. So in this part, you can see that two sides of spatial planning are actually working for different issues and for different missions. Yeah. At the same time, we have some so-called functional territories overarching the administrative territories. And we are also very, very active in European Union motivated functional territories. So in terms of CLLD, integrated territorial investments, and cross-border territories. So there are many, many soft spaces in the system. Here is just a figure. I think it can be quite frightening. As I mentioned, Hungary is a small country. And here you can see how the 2 types of planning activities changed over the last couple of decades. At national level, we have continuously both type of plans. But at different regional levels, you can see that some regional levels emerged as a planning level and later disappeared. Some of them was motivated by the European Union. For example, the NUTS 2 level planning was, at the beginning, it was really motivated to follow the idea European Union cohesion, regional policy ideas. Okay, so yes, as I've mentioned, we have several new planning entities. And many of them was influenced and motivated by the European Union. And however, it is also quite typical in Hungary that during certain governments, certain territorial entities emerges as planning development geographical zones and areas in terms of tourism, for economic development purposes, different enterprise zones, functional regions of the Balaton region and the Budapest metropolitan agglomeration, and so on and so on. But what is very important that these categories, these planning entities are typically not really long lasting. So there is a continuous changes in the processes. However, it is important to emphasize once again the influence of the European Union again. One specific and good example is how the so-called integrated urban development strategies emerged, also as a mainstream regulated planning instrument in cities. Unfortunately, in the last reform, that category disappeared, but the content and its approach still exists in the developmental and the local level spatial plans. Okay, finally, some conclusions. I recognize your pressure on me to shorten. So, what I've already said, spatial planning has never been a strong policy field. This is why we don't really have a separate professional field. The subnational levels of authorities, the government is typically very weak. We have many transformations and processes which are described in the overall European spatial planning literature. We have new territorial governance forms. The participation, civic engagement is being strengthened. We have new spaces of planning, but the motivations and the drivers are a little bit different. So in Hungary, it was very good to see from from your Umberto, okay, your presentation that Hungary was classified as a market-led spatial development system, while the decision makers believe strongly that this is a state-led spatial development system. And until we will not recognize this contradiction, we will never be able to really influence this spatial development. This land use planning is absolutely connected to what Dominic just said, the authority as a governance instrument, while the development-oriented planning is only connected to the treasure approach of governance tool. So the development planning is only about preparing plans for governmental grants, for European Union subsidies, and there is a huge lack to communicate with the private sector, with the private investors efficiently. So there is a quite frequent fluctuation, changes, relatively low level of stability, which provides opportunity for new innovations, new solutions, new ideas. On the one hand, on the other hand, it does not support to have a real comprehensive planning, which is planning is really to coordinate the spatial development of different territories, rather quick, rapid interventions are happening in Hungary. I wanted to tell much more, but I appreciate, I take into account timing. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Gisa. Ho perso tutto. Thank you so much. We are going to the end of this session. I'm so sorry because the previous session take time to the discussion. So it was difficult to open a round table at this time. I just want to ask also Umberto to come to give some, you can say, don't worry, to give some conclusion, because in your intervention, you really change the mind in an opposite way against Italy, because as Umberto said, in Italy, we try to move from urbanism to more comprehensive model, while you are going to urbanism. So this is already strange for us. But other dynamics are similar to ours. So the emergence of new planning spaces, and also the attempt to involve in planning also the cohesion policies and all the European instruments and policies. Another difference is what you proposed to see the role of planning to support the implementation of other policies. For us, is always the contrary. We use other policies to implement planning, to give operationality to our planning instruments. So this could be another view of planning that, in my opinion, should be explored. I don't know, Umberto, if you want to see some other things, or I let the discussion to the lunch time because now they are waiting for us. I thanks all the presenters. So thank you so much, and hope to continue this discussion later. Thank you.